Thank you all for coming out. Thank you to MEREDA for having us again. I think I've been doing this since about 2008. This is a different format, so it's fun to try this. We're going to talk about the residential market here in Southern Maine, and the three of us represent relatively distinct either geographical areas or property types. So I'm going to talk about multifamilies. Elise will cover Southern Maine as well as some full state statistics. And Aaron is really an expert in Central and Western Maine. Aaron actually has 4 different offices in Skowhegan, Wilton, Jackman, and Rangeley. And so while we represent different areas, we're going to try and highlight some common themes that we're seeing between our markets. And so format-wise, this is what we're going to do. I think it's going to be like the other presentations you've seen at this point. We didn't really know how these were going to go. But we're going to do sort of condensed versions of what we might have done in the past. So we're going to try and keep to about 10 minutes each, and then have a little bit of a discussion between the three of us, because we want to get into a little more of the narrative stuff about what we're seeing on the ground. And I think we should have some time to open up for questions if they are really easy softball questions. So we are actually a little stat heavy on our slides, so I sort of pre-apologize for that, but we wanted to lay the groundwork for what's going on in our market with the numbers, and then have that to base our conversation on. So let's see, keep it there for a second before we get too into the stats. But with multifamily, so my slides are all on the multifamilies. This is, I think, like we heard from Justin Montaigne, if you heard him talk about industrial, and like you're going to hear from the others, is just a real contraction in the market. There just were not a lot of deals being done because of interest rates, because of low inventory. And these numbers are really stark. That the number of transactions in Portland was down 40% is incredible. That is a serious contraction in the market. And likewise, Saco Biddeford, so things are changing up here, was down a lot, and even Lewiston Auburn. So let me know if there's something I should be doing different here. So and what we saw here in Portland is people were really leaving, the investors are moving out of Portland, and so this is understandable, but they're starting to go out to the Lewiston Auburn market and Saco Biddeford, trying to get away from the rent control and other areas where there's more affordability and more opportunity for some upside. Next slide. And so this trend is reflected also in the total volume, which is really the same thing as the transactions. There just are not as many deals being done. Interestingly, Lewiston Auburn is actually up a little bit, even though their sales are down because their prices are up so much. But prices are really what we're interested in. And Portland, despite the slowdown, despite rent control, the prices are still going up. And it's a really strange dynamic. And I think this is going to be one of our themes today, which is there's nothing on the market, interest rates have doubled, and yet prices are going up. And maybe even some buyer softening that we're going to talk about. And so it's just weird, it almost feels like a contradiction. So that orange line shows what the price increase was 2 years ago, and the darker orange line is the increase this past year. So Portland was up 14% 2 years ago, still up 17%. Saco and Biddeford, about the same, 13%, 11%. And Lewiston Auburn, really up 20%, 22% year over year. These are some incredible numbers and incredible growth rates. And in Portland, it's really driven by the 2 to 4 unit market. And in multifamilies, I say this every year, but they're really 2 discrete markets. They're related, but they're different. 2 to 4 units in the multifamily world are an extension of the residential market. These are 30-year fixed rates. Owner occupants can get a loan here with a 3.5% down loan through FHA. There's actually a new Fannie Mae program out through the government with a 5% down program for owner occupants. So the government trying to stimulate more buying, more first-time buyer opportunities in the multifamily space. And we're seeing that reflected in the prices of 2 to 4 units in Portland, where they're still going up. And these are pretty much all owner occupants now. In the past, in Portland, this market would have been split about 50-50 between people who are buying a 2 or a 3 unit as an investor, and half were buying as an owner occupant. Well, in Portland with rent control, it's hard for the investors to make it work, and the owner occupants are winning for 2 reasons. One, they want a place to live. So this is really an extension of the single family house market. They just want to live in Portland, and they can live in a 2-unit, 3-unit, or 4-unit. And rent control doesn't apply to the folks who are living in these buildings. So for 2 reasons, the owner occupants are really now driving the market in Portland, which is not as much the case in Lewiston and Auburn or in Saco and Biddeford. So prices are still up 8% this past year, although 17% the year before. Now, I put this slide in because what's not showing up in the statistics is that it does feel like the buyer market's slowing, understandably. Rates have been 3%, and this year they were almost touching 8%. So the buyer market's slowing down, and yet the prices, on paper they're going up, but I can tell you on the ground it doesn't feel like they're still going up. And so we had a couple sellers who, we put the multi on the market, and a month out there, it's still on the market. 2 months, it's still on the market. I'm like, wow, this hasn't happened in years. What's going on? And we even had to do a couple price reductions. And the seller said to me, look, I'm not going to fire sell this thing. I'm not just going to give it away. I said, well, let's look at where we are. Where were the price in 2019, and where is it this year in 2023? And we're up 64%. So a 2-unit in 2019 was about $430,000, and this year it was $700,000. So it's been a dramatic increase. COVID and all the energy we've gotten, all the people coming to Maine, has really just, like the residential market that we hear about in the news every day, gotten into this market too. So from the seller perspective, if you're down a little bit, if it's off a little bit, keep track of where we've come from, because there's just still unbelievable numbers. And as I mentioned, I've been doing this for a while, and my slides going back, it was running up to 2019 dramatically. And it seemed to be plateauing, and then COVID happened, and it did this, another 64%. So I'm going to keep moving here. Now, the commercial market in Portland is a totally different story. This is 5 and up. This is the investor grade stuff. These guys are affected by rent control, and I don't know why it didn't slow down sooner, but this year the combination of rent control 2.0, which makes it so you can only get 70% of inflation as an increase on your rents, and the increased interest rates really finally started to have an effect. And we see prices go from 185 a unit down to 125 a unit. We see the price per square foot reflecting the same thing. So Portland investment multis really took a hit, and these investors are mostly not looking in Portland, and they're going out looking for other opportunities. So Lewiston and Auburn, drilling down into their 2 to 4 units, see a similar thing in Portland, just more so. They're up 26% 2 years ago, another 23%. There's so much activity going to Lewiston and Auburn. It's more affordable. First-time buyers can afford to get a property there. And we had never sold multis in Lewiston and Auburn. We did a portfolio of 10 properties last year, and we had first-time buyers local, new Mainers as first-time buyer owner occupants, investors from in-state, investors from out-of-state. It's like everybody was playing in that market, and so it's understandable why so much price increase there, and also still pretty constrained inventory. And I think this is my last slide. The commercial market in Lewiston Auburn really reflects the same thing, just all the energy that's going there and the price increases. Now, I'll asterisk this with a caveat, which is it's not all unicorns and rainbows in Lewiston Auburn. I think there's a lot of investment going into the multifamily space. It was interesting that while we were selling these properties, getting multiple offers, many offers $50,000 over asking and more for the multis in Lewiston. J. Dosty Jewelers was leaving the downtown because it was getting too difficult, and they were losing traffic because the downtown area is tough right now. So I think there's a lot of different things going on in that market, and I'm not telling you all to rush there and that it's all perfect and we'll keep going up forever. I just want to reflect what's happened up until now. So I think that was my last slide. We're trying to keep this moving, and like I said, so we can get into a little more discussion. Sorry for the heavy numbers. I'm going to hand it off to Elise Kiely.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming and hearing this presentation. I'm going to talk to you about the residential real estate market in southern Maine, and then I'll also add in some numbers for the whole state. And if I could summarize what's been happening in the residential market in one word, I'd have to say resiliency. And I think the economist this morning stole my word, because that's how he described the economy as a whole. And the reason I say that is I remember last year, the third quarter, fourth quarter, I think there are several of us that were feeling a little uneasy about what was 24 going to look like. We have rising interest rates, we have low inventory. Are we having a hard landing, a soft landing? What did Jamie Dimon feel? What is inflation? What's happening in the White House? So there's all of this confusion, and people were reacting very quickly to different news items. And we were all expecting a softening in prices in the Maine real estate market, and it just didn't happen. And it's still not happening. And I'm going to get into some numbers in a minute, but to give it some context of what these numbers mean, I want to describe to you two different sets of my clients that I had over the last few years. One is a very nice couple in their early to mid-20s. She's a nurse at Maine Med. He's in public safety, and they were both working in Portland, first-time home buyers. And they had a budget of $300,000. Now, 2019 numbers, that's not an unreasonable budget. And they were willing to be 40 minutes outside of Portland. They knew they had to be 40 minutes outside of Portland to afford that. So 2021, 2022, they lost out on several properties because of multiple bidding, finally got exhausted. Elise, these houses aren't worth this much. We're not going to pay COVID prices. This is ridiculous. And they decided to tap out. They were exhausted, and they went into a rental. On the other end of the extreme are what I call affectionately, my labs. These are my luxury, lifestyle, active baby boomers. And these, I'm sure a lot of you all have these same clients. They are very well heeled, they have strong cash position, and they want the signature property that is going to add to their lifestyle. It's going to be a magnet for multiple generations, friends and family to come and gather. And it has to be near their activities, near their tennis, near their golf, near their boat. And they want an easy drive-in to multiple restaurant options. In fact, I was talking to this one particular couple. They're in their 80s buying what is probably was going to be their second or third home. And they said, yeah, we're going to start skiing. And I said, skiing? Wow, that's impressive. And they said, no, SKI. We're going to spend the kids' inheritance. And that's exactly what they did. Their budget was $3 million. They were out of state. I found them an off-market property that checked all their boxes, and they spent $5 million, cash, sight unseen, and are extremely happy with that decision. Thank goodness. So going into my slides, this is not going to be a surprise to anyone in this room. This is Cumberland and York counties, single families and condos. And you see the trend here starting in 2017, slowly going up, and then of course the significant increase with COVID, 20, 21, 22. We had basically an 8.5% increase in the median sale price. And so remember my sweet little first-time homebuyer couple, 2019, $300,000, not unreasonable. Now they're looking for that same house, $425,000, $450,000. That's a big difference for a young couple starting out in their life. Next slide.
At a higher interest rate.
At a much higher interest rate, for sure. So part of the equation here are the reduction in new listings and a steady decline with a dramatic incline in 21 and 22, over a 10% decrease in new listings in these two counties. Next slide. I love this slide because the blue line is the number of sold units. And we're bumping along 2017, 2018, 19, 20, 21. Wham! 2021, we go from a significant decrease and then another decrease in 22 to 23, almost a 17% reduction in the number of sold units. And you look at this, the red line is the Fed rate, not the mortgage interest rate. But you see down here where it's basically 0 and 21, wham, the other way, the interest rate goes up and the reduction in sold units. And so you see that correlation very clearly. Next slide. So the sold dollar volume, you might think with this significant increase in the median sales price that we would see this explosion in sold dollar volume. But when you compare it 22 to 23 in these two counties, you see we had about a 10.5% reduction in the total volume. And that just shows the impact of the reduction of inventory. Next slide. So what we saw in Cumberland and York County is really mirrored in the rest of the state. We're seeing an increase in the median sales price of 7.5%, reduction of almost 20% in sold listings, and here we see a reduction in the sold volume of about 11% across the state from 22 to 23. This is just single family homes, by the way. Next slide. So we all see these people coming in, or we perceive all these people coming in from out of state. Maine is one of the state where more people have moved to than any other state. You've moving company statistics, Maria statistics, and we all sort of feel this. And this is a product of COVID, the remote work, people wanting lifestyle improvement. And so I wanted to look, where are all these nice people coming from into our nice state of Maine? And the good news is the vast majority, over 2/3, are the nice people in Maine are staying in Maine, which is terrific. And it's when we get to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we're really in the single digits. Massachusetts of 8, New Hampshire at 4, New York, Florida at 2.5, and New York at 2. Okay, the next slide is really fun. So this shows the number of people in each state that moved to Maine last year. So, like when Aaron, Brit, and I were preparing for this, we sort of giggled over this slide. Like Brit said, North Dakota. I've never met anybody that moved here from North Dakota, but last year there were 2 people sitting at their kitchen table saying, we're moving to Maine.
Is anyone here from North Dakota?
Yeah, does anyone have a client from North Dakota? Or Wisconsin, Nebraska? But what's also interesting about this slide is every state is represented. So somebody in every state decided they wanted to buy property in Maine. And we had 25 international buyers. That's pretty unique. I did meet at least one of the 3 from Hawaii. I think you did too, yeah. Okay, next slide. So I call it the COVID tail. I've heard people refer to it as the COVID hangover. Hangover is short, COVID tail is long. So it is the COVID tail, and we are seeing the consequences and the repercussions of COVID. And this is the same information, just said another way. Median sales price, 2019, 225, 2023, 360. Remember my sweet little first-time homebuyer couples. This is a really hard situation for them. It's the perfect storm of unaffordability. High prices, high rates, no inventory. Number of sold listings, no surprise, went down. That's all right. And the sold volume went up when you compare 2019 to 2023. When you compare 22 to 23, it went down. Next slide. So I wanted to look, when preparing for this presentation, what has been the impact on the luxury market? In 2019, if you had said, Elise, what's the price point that defines luxury? I said probably around $1 million, either side of $1 million. And in 2019, we had 307 transactions in the state of Maine, single family and condos, over $1 million. In that same year, 60 of those were over 2, and 5 of those were over 5 million. Now leapfrog down from 19 to 23. We went from 307 to 904. In 4 years, 3 times as many. What's interesting, looking at over 2 million, we went to 185. Again, 3 times as many. And over 5 million, again, 3 times as many. And I predict at this conference next year, that over 5 million will be even higher. Right now, I think last I checked, we had 27 properties in the state of Maine with a list price over 5 million. I think someone is going to add an over 10 million next year to this. And this is the impact of my labs, right? These are the people that were coming in, maybe they had a budget of $1 million and they ended up going to 2 million, or they had a budget of 3 million and going to 5 million without a blink of an eye. And they're not thinking when they're bidding on a property, well, what did the house next door sell for? And what are the comparables? They're thinking, what do I have to do to get this property? And I want to bid hard so that I get it and the buyer coming in behind me doesn't get it. That's the competition. That's the market analysis. And that's why our clients need all of us to help educate them through that transaction. And then this last slide I think is interesting. I just picked 3 really interesting properties. These were lab purchases. Scarborough, 11.5 million. Kennebunkport, our office, 9 million. And this Saco sweet little beach house for 2.65. All cash, all fast close, all lifestyle purchases. And you may say, well, that's interesting, but why'd you include this one for 2.65? That's kind of small in terms of price point. What's interesting about this property is that it sold 60% above list price, $1 million above list price. That was a lab that came in, I want this house, I want it for my family, and I want to make sure the 10 other offers, the 10 other buyers that are bidding on it, don't get it. So is the luxury market pulling the market up? I don't know, but I think it's a reasonable discussion, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that afterwards. But now I'll hand it over to my friend Aaron to talk more about the rural parts of Maine.
Thank you, Elise.
Thanks, Elise.
That's awesome. Good job. So just a quick thank you to Brit and Elise. We spent a lot of time together over the last few weeks, and two brilliant minds. I've got to know them. I just appreciate both of you in a public way. I just wanted to say thank you for all your coaching and help along the way.
Likewise.
Yeah. So just to put in perspective, as Brit said, I'm from basically the woods. So I'm going to set a little stage of where I am and talk a little bit about that area and also about the state of Maine. So a quick story. After 9/11, we had a big influx of people from New York City trying to get to the woods for obvious reasons. They were scared. And I'll never forget these wonderful people. They were coming to our office at 1 o'clock. And at 5 after 1, I decided to call them. Now, we didn't have the fancy phones we have today. We had, the bag phones or a flip phone. And GPSs weren't around. We had the old maps. If you had a Garmin or a TomTom, you were somebody special, And so at 5 after 1, I called them and said, "They're just checking in and making sure you're okay." They said, "Yeah, we didn't realize how far north you are." I said, "Okay, well, where are you?" "I'm at the office. Do not rush. I'll be here. But where are you?" And they said, "Well, we're at exit 2 on Interstate 95. So that's where I am, about 2 hours north of here. And they showed up, and it wasn't for them. But anyway, so it's a little different than New York City. So Somerset County, mainly just want to talk about population density, 13 people per square mile, right? And that's pretty light. So you get into Kennebec County, obviously that's where the capital is. That's still not too many people at 143 per square mile. And you go back to the woods of Kennebec County, you're at 18 people per square mile. So just to put it in perspective here, where we are today, in Cumberland County, the highest population in the state, which is not real dense compared to the rest of the cities in the country, but 362 people. But you can clearly see that there's not a lot going on where I live. We invented social distancing before it was a thing. So, but it just kind of sets the stage of where you're at in Maine when I talk about some of these numbers. So as Elise pointed out earlier, the median sale price last year, 2023, single family and condos were $360,000. And you can see Franklin County at $250, Kennebec just shy of $300, and Somerset at $210. I went back, next slide, I went back 5 years, and you can clearly see Maine on the blue. It is way, appreciating year after year after year. That's been no surprise. What is a surprise to me, being, in this business for over 2 decades, is that even the most rural parts of Maine showed appreciation, which I know that may sound foreign to some of you and maybe down in this section of Maine, but there are many years where those lines were flat. And it's very frustrating as a seller that wanted to be good stewards of their property. They'd put money in to keep it up and pride in home ownership. And it really was flat for year 1, year 2, year 3. Not the case, obviously, the last 5 years, which is exciting, but also challenging for the new generation coming up. The next slide, please. This one here, the sunburst bar graph here, talks about all the sales that were inputted into Maine listings. Maine's very fortunate. We have one multiple listing system, one MLS, with very few states in the country that has that. So this sunburst is all the sales. You can see we peaked out, and then we've been dropping, obviously, about 18% in 22, and down to 23, about the same. And single-family homes, not as big of a curve, although there is a curve. We actually peaked out in 20 and a little bit more in 21, but then, as Elise mentioned, 18% in 22, and then another decrease last year of another 18%. So not great. Next slide, please. I just wanted to get into the cash sales a little bit. The total cash sales, I'll take you right over to 2023. according to our main listings database, last year, 43% of our sales in this state, now keep in mind that this is single family, this is condos, this is a lot of land sales, some of the multifamily sales, and a few commercial deals sprinkled in. We know there's many platforms, the commercial practitioners in the room, they use different platforms. They're not inputting their data into this system. But still, that's a remarkable number. At 43% of the deals closed with all liquid cash. Now, in my area, in the woods, I saw mom and dad, Graham and Grant, buying the homes and actually paying all cash. And not every time, but they would sell it post-closing to their loved one that was trying to get in on the market. Now, Brit, I know that's a different story of what you and Elise had in the southern part of the state.
Yeah, we didn't really see that dynamic. We were seeing the buyers had the cash. It wasn't the buyer, your $5 million buyers.
Yeah, they had the cash. They were the Graham and the Grahams.
So we're saying,
Right.
oh,
They
they
were
were
the
the
Graham
money.
and
Like, no,
Grahams.
they just have the money here.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to see that. I've never seen that in my career. And I thought it was an interesting slide to talk about. The next one, please. Just, again, kind of regurgitating a little of these numbers. The total sales and then the single-family sales. So anything above the beige is the land, the multis, and the little bit of commercial that's sprinkled in there. And then we just go into the absorption rate into the 3 counties, Somerset County, Franklin County, and Kennebec County, with the exception of Franklin County in 2021. They're very small markets. And there was a few investors, obviously, saw the market going crazy. But you can see the absorption rate clearly, with that one exception, is dropping down, down, down. I can tell you there were years that those buildings would be for sale. You could have put a free sign on them, and nobody would have took them. And so it's interesting where here we are last year, you only see a few months' worth. So it's quite a change in just a short time. And then land, this is astounding to me. We live in a state, 89% forest. And I just showed you, we have 20 people per square mile, and there's no land to buy. It doesn't matter if it's a couple acres, or we used to call kingdom lots 1,000 acres or more. You can't really even get 1,000 acres. There's only 7 listed in the whole state. So it's really amazing to watch even land, people parking money, either they want to recreate and pass it down to their families. I think it's fascinating how much forest we have and the lack of availability it is actually to purchase. Next sale. The absorption rate, this was done a month ago. Moving target, there was some opportunity. In the winter, people have less energy. And we did build up some multifamilies and some land over the winter. That's changed drastically in the last 30 days because we haven't had winter. So people are moving around, they're transacting. I think we're at this point in the real estate market, in the single family and condos at least, where we got like a frozen shoulder. The body's still working, but we have to figure out as professionals how to lead people down this path to their home and figure out how we get into that equity. We just demonstrated that sale prices are really high and there's a ton of equity, but I feel like we're frozen up. And I think that's the challenging part in 2024 and beyond is how do we take that shoulder, even though the legs are working and the other arm's working fine, but it hurts a little bit. And that's why our sales are down 18% for the last 2 years. That's not sustainable, folks, right? And you can compare it a lot to 1995. Last year in this country, we only sold 4.1 million homes. In 1995, we sold like 3.9. Not that 1995 was a bad real estate year. The problem is there's 70 million more people in this country today than there was in 1995. So where are they all living? That's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. Next slide, and my last slide, just a fun slide. I'm not a NASCAR person, but this was a race where Craven beats Busch 0.2 of 1/1000th of a second. My prediction in 2024, single family, it is as tight as that right there, that race. And we have to solve the problem collectively together and come up with solutions so that we make that maybe only a 1-second win, you know, but we need to get something on the clock so that we can get some inventory loosened up, get some equity out of some of these homes, and make transactions happen. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks. I wanted to, before we just open it up to questions, we actually try to leave a little bit of time so we could talk in a little bit more of a free-form way for just a few minutes. And one thing I just wanted to touch on, because the prices are going up and the stats are all going up, Elise, how are you feeling about pricing? I gave my couple anecdotes of, oh, we put the price out there and it sat and we actually did some first price drops. We're still getting multiple offers maybe, but not as many.
Yeah.
What's going on the ground?
I think pricing is critical right now. The biggest mistake I think we as professionals can make is overpricing a property. And it's really hard because there's very little comparables to be able to use in pricing a property. With that said, I am still in advising buyers, if this is the property you want, then I think you need to go in hard. And the last 3 transactions I've been in have been multiples. Now, they haven't been 20 offers or even 10 offers. Maybe they've been at 5 and under, but those offers have been really strong. And so I am still seeing an increase on those specialty high-end lifestyle properties. And even, even in the suburbs of Portland, where somebody coming in with a high-income W-2 job, but they're not all cash, they're not a lab, they're working. You could get a really good home in those suburbs, $750,000, $800,000. Now that buyer's looking at 1.112. I don't know how sustainable it is to have that continue to go up, but I'm still seeing some price increases.
Aaron, are you feeling any difference in buyer demand, or is it's still low inventory and there's plenty of demand for the small amount of inventory?
Yeah, it's nothing we can graph out, but I definitely feel like there's this little bit of the robustness is gone. You know, sometimes something will come on the market and you're like, wow, that's going to fly off, and it collects on the market for a week or two, unlike, last year or the year before, where it would just fly off the shelves with 10 or 12 offers, maybe you only get 2 offers. So I do think there's a little bit of reserve. Contingencies are back. People are inspecting homes, which I'm very excited about. I mean, they should know what they're buying, right? I mean, that's just confidence in the consumer, and that's what I want, and a lot of you want in this room is for that consumer to understand what they're getting into. So just not quite as robust. It's still there.
Yeah.
I want to add one thing to that. I think what we are going to start seeing is condition is going to start mattering again. And I think we saw that after the Great Recession, that condition was a real issue in houses and helping them sell. And for the last 4 years, I think a lot of buyers rationalized older condition, maybe some deferred maintenance. I think buyers' expectations are that properties will be in good condition and updated.
We've seen some openings for FHA buyers for the first time this past year where they didn't even have a prayer. And the last year, maybe the right property opens up. I think to your point, though, Elise, the openings seem to happen on the properties that aren't in as good a condition. And then the FHA struggles because then you've got compliance inspection issues there. So it's still hard. Do you think the demand's going to keep coming? We've got climate refugees, in-state, out-of-state remote workers. Are we over some COVID peak? Are people still coming north from out-of-state?
Yeah,
Second homes?
Yeah, we just had a Massachusetts buyer the other day. They bought a piece of land sight unseen and loved it. And I don't like sight unseen. I tell my agents it's really why not put a contingency in there? I mean, the robustness is over. They didn't want other buyers, so they're still coming to Maine. Maine is on the map, and it's still, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it's still relatively affordable compared to a lot of places in the country. It's safe. We have clean air, clean water. It's a great place to be. I mean, we're all here, so why not?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think Maine is definitely on the map. And credit to everybody in this room and in the other 2 rooms. One of the reasons Maine is on the map is that we have demonstrated we've exported this idea of Maine, healthy outdoor lifestyle, affordable, safe in this chaotic world. it is perceived as authentically so, as an oasis, where other places can be more complicated, more dangerous, and less affordable.
New construction. It seems like there are towns where the only inventory that's available is new construction. We're seeing it a lot in the multifamily world, and I think both nationally and locally, a lot of the development is actually on the multifamily side. I didn't have a slide on it, but I want to mention there are rumblings that the rental market could start to soften. Over this past winter, I had multiple landlords come up to me at different times and say, "Hey, what's going on with the rental market?" I said, "I don't know why." He said, "Well, I've had this 2-bedroom. It's been vacant for 2 months." I said, "What? I haven't heard that in 15 years." So at some point, we're building a lot of units, and so we're supposed to have 80,000 or something, but we're building a fair amount in Brunswick
even in rural Maine. I mean, the little Madison is a 4,000 population town, little mill town. I mean, there's 36 units. It doesn't sound like a lot. There's 36 new units being built in that little town. That's 36 more units than I've ever seen in the last 25 years. So it's happening.
And the occupancy is?
The occupancy, there was a 40-unit built in Skowhegan, and the occupancy, it didn't take long, just a matter of a few months. And I got to talk to one of the tenants. I was just kind of being nosy one day with one of my agents. We had a tenant, and she come out, she gave us the whole story. She got the last unit, 40 units, and it filled quick. So even in the most rural parts of Maine, we're seeing some new structures.
Yeah, I mean, from a forecast perspective, at some point, do prices mellow out, do rents mellow out, because we are building and building, because the old LD 2003 passed, and every town should now be allowing more density. Mm-hmm. At some point, it'll be interesting to see if the curve sort of catches up. I want to open it up to questions if anyone has one. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking until I see someone at the mic. And Craig's going to borrow our mic. Aaron, you mentioned, I thought it was such a smart way to say it, unlocking the equity. That these prices have gone up, and probably many people in this room have a lot of equity in their home. But recently I talked to a friend who's getting divorced, and he said, "Look, Brit, I've got this unicorn. I bought my house back in 2016, and I've got a 2.7% interest rate. So I've got all this equity in my house, but how do I get it out? I've got to go refi at 7%, 7.5%. I've now got to go buy another place." And so it's like there, and he's looking at it and can't touch it. How do we help people with this?
I think that is the number one question right now. And people who have a 3% mortgage, I was joking that it's almost like, those stick figure pictures that children draw of their families. Maybe there's 2 parents and a child and a dog. Well, next to the second child or the third child, it should be a square with 3% into it. People are so proud of their 3% mortgage. Like, come to my house for dinner. Look at my 3% mortgage. It just makes them feel good, right? It makes them feel comfortable. And people are really hesitant to give that up, emotionally and fiscally, for sure. But that's, I think, where we can be helpful in guiding clients. If this property is not the right property for you, if it is too big and your operating expenses are too high, or if it's too small and you're bursting at the seams and you can't find a contractor to do an addition or do a renovation, that's where we need to guide them. And I feel like 6 is the new 3. Once we get to 6, and I know some people were talking about maybe 5, 5.25 at one of the breakouts, but I think once we get to 6, I think that's the trigger where people will feel comfortable and saying, okay, I can stomach 6. It's not 3, but 3 is in the history. And 6 is a lot easier to come off of 7 to 8. I did a deal where there was 9% interest rate than it is to go from 3 to 6. So I think we're going down. I think that will unlock inventory for both, it'll bring buyers out for sure, but I think it'll make sellers feel comfortable selling as well.
Craig.
Yeah, thanks so much. I just had a quick question when you were talking about new construction. I was talking to a developer doing a really small-scale project and trying to keep the prices low. I mean, they had offers above asking price, and they said, no, we want to reserve this property for, someone who is at a lower income. And then looking at their their sell price, which was, below 300K, which we think of as, being a somewhat affordable house, but then looking at the main housing data, in that town, the median income could only afford 180K homes. So even with developers, trying to create these affordable houses, there's still, in this case, 100 grand above what the median income in that specific town can afford. And I know there's a lot of different factors, but I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit about how, we're looking at this housing data, but the income data is also, I think, a big piece of it. And so even if we're seeing, the housing market starting to slow down, the income hasn't really even come close to keeping up with it. And we're seeing that across the whole state with the main housing data. So I was just wondering if you could speak to that a bit. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I think it's definitely behind, main housing on some of those projections. So maybe rural housing, that could be another option to look at. They have the direct program, and some of those rates are well below market rates. So that might be a good option for your client.
But you asked some huge macro questions that are beyond the scope of us meager residential brokers. But it is a huge challenge. Most private market rate developers are developing houses and condos that are for the upper half of income earners. And it really requires government subsidies to build anything for any other level of income. And construction costs and everything, and labor, and if you're in the development sessions, they talk about it just costs that much to put it up. And that's absolutely a challenge. I want to also just make a note here that I think the insurance market is changing significantly. And I think from the investor perspective, it's something that multifamily investors are going to be looking at and is going to start to hit. I think new flood maps apparently are coming out for Cumberland and York County in June. And we're talking about cost of ownership, affordability. Insurance rates are not going down anytime soon. And I think we should all be aware of that and factor that into our numbers for homeowners, investors alike. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, guys. Quick question. Maine is a tale of two places, right? It's vacation land, but now it's where everyone wants to live permanently as well. We have this bifurcation in the market, which obviously affects sales prices on homes because you have people who want to move here for these key luxury properties. We take a lot of properties out of the supply for local Mainers. How do you feel about a new property tax that is taxing second homes, out-of-state owners at a different rate than in-state, and would that help free up inventory and supply for locals living in the state?
I think you're in the wrong room. I have no comment on whether I support taxation. I've done enough political stuff. I'm taking some time off. We're trying to, these are all challenges, right? I mean, I think there are seminars every week with really smart people thinking about housing and thinking about smart growth and thinking about density. And I guess, you two both just brought up some real concerns. I would say get involved in your municipalities. You've got to be pro-housing. You've got to be pro-development. You can't be pro-historic and parking and everything. You can't have your cake and eat it too on these things. And so as a community, housing and pricing is a huge issue. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. So get involved in your local community and figure out how to be pro-housing. I mean, I guess that's my response to these big questions about income and affordability. Transportation is a factor. There's a lot of stuff here, and it's very complicated.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, not a lot of developers want to go into that entry level. And, I can remember when my parents, when I was just a young lad, they bought a brand new house, and they could afford it on one income. Where can you go in the state of Maine today? I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old. Where can you go today and on one income buy a brand new house? You can't do it. I mean, I'd like to know where. You can't even do that in Aroostook County. So it's definitely bigger than this room, and we need to, all get a seat at the table, I think, from municipalities, from developers, and real estate professionals and lenders and try to figure it out in some way. We can't say we give up. You know, there is hope. This morning we heard the doctor. I mean, that's a great, at least a little bit of relief coming, I feel like.
Elise, I loved your story about your clients skiing. Learning to ski. I wanted to just ask real quickly, you dropped the acronym very, very fast. What does LAP stand for again?
So it's I made it up, so it's nothing. I made it up, so it's nothing official. It stands for Luxury Lifestyle Active Baby Boomer. And if you look demographically at the baby boomers, and these particular clients, that they're a little just past baby boomer, but they act like baby boomers. We have this big bubble of baby boomers around the country, and they are having a significant impact, and they've done very well in the stock market. They have done very well in their real estate investments. And I think COVID has taught everybody the lesson of life is short and life is uncertain, and I want to go and do the things I want to do. And I want my family my friends to be able to do them with me. And they're having a real impact in the market. And you could agree with it, or you could disagree with it, say it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's reality.
And I would add to that, that's probably the highest end that we're seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing remote workers who are effectively from Manhattan or DC, but now can live here because they're allowed to work remotely. We've got people moving into some of the towns who sold the tech company in California and now can be here in Maine and raise their kids in Maine. So I do think that COVID did change the landscape enough, and there are some things that have changed and are not flipping back, where there are just some higher income earners here than there used to be, and that's pushed the price up. Which is why Elise started with her story, which is there are a lot of people who are now just priced out, and unaffordability is a real problem. And then there's a whole segment where it's not a problem, and that's what's defining our market.
Time for one last question.
Since you brought it up, Brit, what have we seen, and I guess it's a two-part question, both for Southern Maine and then, of course, for Northern Maine, with the LD ordinances that have come into play? How are you marketing potential properties that could have that accessory building, could be a single family that's now a duplex or a quadplex? So are you marketing that yet in Southern Maine, and are you marketing it up in Somerset and Kennebec County yet?
So I'm going to say I know some about it. We, as a realtor organization, we hosted a really great event on it a few months ago. The municipalities are still integrating it and updating their ordinances literally town by town as we speak. And so every town has a different application of it. So it's pretty complicated. So we have not started marketing it yet. We're trying to be aware that it's coming. I think Portland just accepted a pretty aggressive version of it, which I think basically every single family lot in Portland can now have a 4-unit on it. But not every town's doing that. So unfortunately, it's not simple. But I do think over time, it's a game changer. It was a huge piece of legislation that absolutely is going to force density into every town.
Yeah, and it's really cloudy and muddy right now. I know it passed by law, but a lot went on after the fact, and until we get real clarity from each municipality, I think it's too premature. And I think going forward, it is going to move the needle in a positive way and create some new units that we desperately need. I mean, we need somewhere around 25,000 units right now throughout our state, and that's not talking about next year and the year after, and so it's going to help. So I'm thankful that the current administration has worked diligently on trying to take care of that. It does have a lot of pushback, though, from some of the municipalities and the local residents.
Well, folks, I just want to say thank you very much. A lot of information, great information, kind of wraps up our thing. But if we can have a round of applause for these folks.
Thank you.